Hey guys, welcome to day 4 of week 6 of biology in quarantine. Today we are finishing up our chapter on ectothermic vertebrates, and we are talking about reptiles. So let's just dive right in. So reptiles have really scaly skin, and they are going to be ectothermic as well. Remember, ectothermic means that they're maintaining their body heat from their surroundings. So that's why you're going to see things like crocodiles, turtles, and snakes right smack in the middle of the road or on a golf course. It's because they're trying to warm up. Reptiles do not have a metamorphic stage, so when they are born, they just get bigger. They don't look any different than when they were born. They also are amniotes, which means their unborn young are surrounded by amnion, which is fluid that keeps the egg or what's inside the egg or what's inside the womb. It protects them, and it also provides nutrients. Humans have the same exact thing. We have amniotic fluid that surrounds our babies in the womb. There are 4 orders of reptiles. We have turtles, lizards and snakes, which are in the same order, crocodilians, and tuateras. We're going to talk about some of these guys that we find in South Carolina and what distinguishes each of them from each other. You can see up in the top right, we've got cute little baby turtles. We've got our lizard just below the turtles. We've got our crocodilian and our snake. And then we have our tuatera on the bottom left. Let's talk a little bit about reptile structure. So they have what's called scales and or scutes. So scales are produced by the epidermis, which is going to be the outermost layer of the skin, where scutes are produced by the dermis. So that's going to be a little bit more inward. You can tell the difference between scales and scutes if you're really up close. So really it's more of a, rather than visually being able to see it, you really have to feel the animal in order to feel it. So the back of turtle shells are scutes, if that makes any sense. Snakes, however, are going to have scales. So it's a little bit hard to distinguish because sometimes you find both of them on the same organism. But what's important for you to know is that scales are produced by the epidermis and scutes are produced by the dermis. Reptiles have 3-chambered hearts with the exception of crocodilians, which have 4-chambered hearts. Remember, those just mean sections. We're not going to get too deep into what chambers of the heart means. I'll save that for Dr. Mack when you take anatomy. So as blood flows through the lungs, oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged, and their rib muscles actually allow the lungs to expand. So that way they can breathe in oxygen and then breathe out carbon dioxide, just like we would. Reptiles have more complex brains than amphibians and fish, and they see pretty well, although they have really poor hearing. They have really poor hearing. Squamates, also known as snakes and lizards, have what's called a Jacobson's organ, and they actually use that for smell. Snakes use this in tandem with their tongues. So if you think about when you see snakes all the time using their tongue, they're not just doing that just to do it. They're actually doing it to sense the world around them, what's happening. Remember, they don't have hands, they don't even have legs to help them out. So they've got to use their tongues in order to navigate throughout the world. And the Jacobson's organ, which helps for smell, in tandem with their tongue, another sensory organ that they can use, helps them to be able to maneuver around their environment. Most reptiles are carnivorous, and a lot of times they don't even bother chewing their food. They just swallow it whole. A lot of reptiles are going to lay eggs. Classically, we know that alligators and crocodiles lay eggs, but there are actually some lizards and snakes that bear live young. Most reptiles are not very good moms, other than crocodiles, believe it or not. I have a wonderful video for you guys to watch of a mama crocodile taking care of her babies. They are one of nature's best mamas, so happy Mother's Day to them coming up. They are such good parents because they stay around the nest after their eggs have been laid. They bury their eggs, and they stay around the nest, so that way if anything tries to come and eat their eggs, they will fight it off to the death. And then when their babies hatch and are ready, they uncover they actually put them in a hole, and when their babies are unhatched, they actually signal out to the mom. She undigs them, and she puts them in her mouth, and she travels back to the water with them, so that way they can learn how to swim and hunt and do all that good stuff. So I have a video. It's pretty amazing. So it's just important to remember that crocodiles make really good moms compared to other reptiles that no good. They aren't very good mamas. So in many cases, the temperature of the nest determines the sex of the young. So with crocodiles, all of their babies are going to either be all male or all female. And that's because all the eggs are laying together, so they're all going to get to the same temperature. Let's take a look at some common reptiles that we see in South Carolina. So we have what's called the common snapping turtle. So you probably have seen this guy around and maybe didn't even realize it. So if you look at that top right hand picture, we have two turtles against each other. The turtle on the left is actually an alligator snapping turtle. The turtle on the right is the common snapping turtle. Well, come to find out, the common snapping turtle, even though it doesn't look quite as scary as the alligator snapping turtle, it actually is a little bit more dangerous to deal with and a little bit more vicious. And that is because it is what's called a nomadic predator. So one, the alligator snapping turtle, his neck is fixed. So, and he often just keeps his mouth open without even shutting it unless you were to stick your finger in the mouth of the alligator snapping turtle. Whereas the common snapping turtle actually has the ability to extend his neck out. So meaning if you put your hand here, he would be able to go, you like that noise? So that makes them a little bit more dangerous to deal with. So they do have a really powerful bite. They can hurt you real good like. They live in fresh water. They're typically 8 to 14 inches long, and they can weigh up to 35 pounds, and they have a 30 to 40 year lifespan. So if you're like me, you stop for turtles on the road. I mean, not on a major highway, of course, because humans are more important than reptiles. But if I'm in a place where it is safe to stop and I can help a turtle across the road, I'm going to do that. More than likely, he's not just there to cross the road. He actually wants to be on the road so that he can warm up, but they don't know any better, so sometimes you got to help them out. But I'm always careful to check to make sure that it's not a snapping turtle before I pick up a turtle. And the way to do that is snapping turtles cannot go inside of their shell. If you look at the picture on the bottom left, you'll see that his body and his shell are fixed. So there's not any place for him to put his arms and to put his head and to tuck it in. So odds are if you come up on a turtle, and even if you're not able to really distinguish the lines, if that turtle does not go into its shell when it sees you approaching, it's more than likely a common snapping turtle, and it might be best to just kind of like scoot it with your foot, but make sure you have sneakers on if you do that, and make sure you do it from behind him so that he cannot get his neck out far enough to grab you. So again, they're what's called nomadic predators. So when they're in the water, they're actually going to travel to find their food. Whereas with the alligator snapping turtle, they actually have a tongue inside of their mouth that resembles a worm. So they wait for prey to come into their mouth and then they shut their jaws. Whereas the common snapping turtle is on the hunt. He is a nomad and he's going to wander around and actually try to catch his prey. So a common lizard that we see in South Carolina is the green anole. I pretty much can guarantee you that if I were to look around hard enough on my porch, I'm sure that there's one hanging around here. They can range from colors from brown to yellow to green, and the color changes are based on how they're feeling at the time and also the temperature and the humidity of the environment around them. So males are going to be larger than females, and males also have what's called a dewlap. Dewlap just means extra skin. So anytime you see that red thing that comes out of their neck, that means that they are either indicating their territory, so they're letting other lizards know, hey, I got this, please do not approach me, and or they're actually looking for a mate. So just like we, get fresh makeup or a fresh pair of J's, they like to show off their dewlap in order to get a date. Alright, snakes and crocodiles happen to be my favorite reptiles of all. Not really sure why, probably because they're a little bit dangerous, and I like dangerous animals typically. Again, not really sure why. But let's talk about a common dangerous snake that we find in South Carolina. So this one's called a cottonmouth. It's also known as a water moccasin. So anytime somebody's talking about either or, they're talking about the same snake. They can get up from 3 to 4 feet long, although there have been some that are longer than that. And they range in color from dark brown to like a drabby yellow color. And they have these striations that are really random. So it's easy to get cottonmouths mistaken for other types of snakes. So in general, you just want to avoid all snakes if possible. Unless you are sure that you can identify it, it's better to just turn the other way with snakes, especially in South Carolina. We have rattlesnakes, we have cottonmouth, we have copperheads, so we have really dangerous snakes here. So when in doubt, just walk away. Now, rattlesnakes, they put up their rattle when they feel threatened, and so a lot of times you're able to see a rattlesnake coming. Cottonmouths are different because they don't give you a warning that they're about to strike. They just are ready to strike. And I actually got this quote from the Department of Natural Resources that says, Unlike other venomous snakes that generally attempt to escape from humans, the cottonmouth will stand its ground. So a lot of times, snakes are just going to do their best to avoid you, so we should do our best to avoid them. With a cottonmouth, more than likely, it's going to stand its ground because it doesn't want to leave where it's at, and it can attack you. Cottonmouths are notorious for attacking small animals or large animals, so if you have a big dog, cottonmouths are notorious for attacking dogs. I hear more of my friends talk about how their dog got bit by a cottonmouth more than I hear people getting bit by cottonmouths. And that's just because dogs go exploring, and if you live close to the water, dogs go exploring. They, look under logs and in the brush and all that kind of stuff, and they're just not really as careful as we might be, and so they usually get bit. So it's very important to make sure that you keep a good eye on your little puppies. My puppy's right here. All right, let's finish up with talking about the American alligator. So this one is also found in South Carolina, and if you've lived here long enough, you have more than likely seen one of these guys hanging out on a golf course or hanging out next to the pond in your neighborhood. So these guys are huge. They get to about 15 feet long, although they can get bigger. They range in lifespan from 35 to 50 years old. I mean, think about that. An animal living from 35 to 50 years old. That's crazy. They have about 80 to 100 teeth, and they actually lose and regrow teeth throughout their lifetime. They are what's called ambush predators. So they are not the kind of predators that, sometimes with predators, if they're out of sight, they're out of mind. So if you don't see one around, you're more than likely not going to be struck by one. The perfect example is going to be the rattlesnake. Typically, not always, but typically, if I don't see a rattlesnake or hear its rattle, then I'm probably not going to get bit by it. American alligators are different. They are what's called ambush predators, which means they are waiting to attack. So not necessarily the guy that's chilling out on the grass right there. He looks like he is in a state of torpor right now. But they like to wait in the water, and when something is close enough to the water, that is typically when they attack. So I don't mean to say that you shouldn't stand by ponds or anything, but you need to be aware that alligators are ambush predators. So just because you don't see them hanging out next to the pond doesn't mean that they're not there, and doesn't mean that they aren't watching you. So stand by ponds with caution, especially if you know that an alligator is there. That's a cool thing about alligators, is that they typically stake their claim, and usually everybody knows it. So you probably, in your own neighborhood or in a neighborhood that you've visited, hey, there's an alligator that lives in that pond. And that's because alligators have to lay out in the sun, right? So they're not very secretive predators. So even though they might lie in waiting in the water, typically word has gotten around to everybody else that there is an alligator in that particular spot. So I don't say that to scare anybody. I just say if you have any small dogs or anything, you might want to be extra careful walking next to the pond. Because they have been known to attack humans. They're more likely going to attack humans if humans have been feeding them. That's why it's so important. You see signs all the time, don't feed the wildlife. There's a reason for that. It's not just because people want to be mean and make up silly rules. It's because when you feed wildlife food that they are not used to, it is going to affect the environment some way, somehow. And unfortunately, with alligators, it affects them negatively because it makes them highly territorial, and it makes them get used to the food that you're providing for them. So they get used to human interaction, they start getting comfortable, and then when they notice that there is a lack of food, that means they're going to go after whatever they can find. So, be careful. They have 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch in their bite. So even though they can bite down really hard, they actually have a really hard time opening their mouths in the first place, which is pretty funny, but they're able to do it in order to get a hold of their prey. And alligators, again, will eat just about anything that crosses their path. So that's why you want to be extra careful walking around a pond. You want to be extra careful walking your dog around a pond, and just be sure that you keep an ear out. And if there's alligators nearby, you probably want to avoid that area altogether. Alright guys, that completes our unit on ectothermic vertebrates. The next video is going to be a test review, and I hope you guys have a great week. Don't forget that you do have a test on Tuesday, May 5th at 10:30 a.m. via Zoom. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Love you guys.